What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. It's our weekly show where we review the magic stories as they're posted on Wizards' website. And again, I say weekly, but we were off last week for some reason. There was still a video on the channel, so feel free to go check it out, but it was not a JaAR video. But this week we are back once again into the full swing of things with The Ledger of Hidden Fortunes by Nikki Drayden. So this is our second to last Ravnica Allegiance story. We have one more next week with the Azorius, and this one is the Orzhov. And my quick review at the top was this was great. I really liked this one. I thought that it was wholesome in the best way, while also having a little bit of, you know, there was still the warning at the beginning of, you know, may not be suitable for some readers or whatever. But so there were still some elements in there that were a little like gross, or moments where we were like, oh wow, okay, you know, but I think at the end of the day the story was quite wholesome, and I don't know, I personally really enjoyed it. What about you?
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was there were a lot of spots where it was very cute.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say. And
is that a good thing or a bad thing in your opinion?
It's a good thing.
Okay.
That's what I said.
Good. Good.
And I feel like I don't know. I didn't realize that disclaimer was there, and I feel like it wasn't necessary.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's been there for each and every one of these, and I think it was warranted in like maybe one or two out of the four, but it's been there for each and every one, so...
Yeah, it seems like that's just what they're going to put in the front of every story now, regardless of what it's about.
Yeah, seemingly, which is fine.
Stupid.
I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, so that's a quick review. We're going to do a quick summary as well, as we've been doing more recently. But if you don't want to be spoiled on the story, if you haven't had a chance to read it yet, check the description down below. We will have a link to the story, so go read it if you haven't yet. If that quick, you know, the quick review that we gave at the top does anything for you, if it means that you want to go check it out now and you have not had a chance, please feel free to go do that. And then, of course, we would love for you to come back to this video and continue the discussion with us. So the quick review here, we had a, they called her an Orzhov collector, and at first I genuinely...
I didn't mean the summary.
What did I say, review? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, onto the summary.
I thought it was odd that it was so cutesy for an Orzhov story. I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. I mean, I think it's to show you that, like, the people within the Orzhov Syndicate can be all kinds of people, so... Yeah. But yeah, so in this story we had what they called an Orzhov collector. And at first I was like, when we started to read the story, I thought that meant that it was someone who collected trinkets and curios and things like that. No, this is a tax collector, or a tithe collector. Taxes, I think, would be more the Azorius. So this is the tithe collector, and you pay your tithes to the church. And so this was a tithe collecting lady named Miri. And she lives with her father and talks about her father and mother. And this story is told as if we have found her notebooks or her ledgers. Hence the Ledger of Hidden Fortunes. And it parses out all the different tithes that she is taking, what percentages she's taking, how much money she's taking in, how much property she's taking in, and what it's worth, and then goes into some writing about herself and her family and etc. You come to find out that one of the things that she does is she is claiming that she is skimming from the tithes. She originally tells her father that she skimmed about 500 Xenos, which we then later find out she's not actually doing that, but her father's like very proud of her because supposedly that's what all the tithe takers do, is they like forge the numbers in their ledgers and take money. She's not actually doing that. Turns out she's working with flesh mages to make thralls because she doesn't like to skim, but she uses the extra money that she makes from flesh maging or making thralls. Half of it she keeps for herself and half she gives back to her family so that they can continue to live luxuriously. She even says at one point that they will not keep less than 3 servants because they have to keep up appearances. So just to give you...
Yeah, I don't think that that's living luxuriously, though. I think that that's, you know, keeping up a facade.
That's true.
Of
that's
living
true.
luxuriously.
Yeah, and she even mentions that, like, some of the people that they see, the oligarchs, for example, that they see, know that they can't afford it, or their ancestor spirits know that they can't afford to do these things, but they do it anyway because it's kind of what's expected of them. But yeah, so she is doing her part and giving up some of her money to her father. We then find out that the tithe has increased at one point from 30% to 40%, and the people are getting a little bit restless about that, and so we get to see a little bit of a dip in payments as opposed to refusals or public floggings or debt notes and things like that. And then we even see her kind of getting the day off at one point because there are literal riots. And so she can't go and collect tithes because people are rioting against
That doesn't sound like actual history or anything.
No. Nikki Drayden has never once in any of her stories written about anything that resembles reality, present day or otherwise.
Alluded to any historical activities that may or may not have occurred.
And so she has some time off, and we come to find out that she's always wanted, she's a member of the Orzhov Syndicate, but she's always wanted to be a member of the Selesnya Conclave. And so during one of
Again, sort of oddly unexpected.
Yes. And so during one of her nights with her flesh mage boss, someone is there to pay a debt and can't pay the debt and is arguing about it, and the flesh mage flays this Selesnyan who Miri believes to be a Dimir spy dressed up as a Selesnyan, but either way, this person is flayed and their skin is kind of taken away to be used by the flesh mages to make more thralls, but there's a cloak left over, or a tunic, if you will, and Miri takes the opportunity to take the cloak and take it back with her to her home, and she kind of hides it because as she has said, her father refuses to have anything green in his home because he is so anti-Selesnya, despite the fact that, again, Miri wanted to be Selesnyan but knew for her father's sake that she was not going to do that. And one night, while her father and mother are out, she decides to wear the Selesnyan cloak. She dances around in it, and she like feels it out, and then her father comes home. And she tries to quickly get out of it, but it's tied too tightly, and her father goes kind of stomping around the house because he's mad because he didn't get the money that he expected to get that night, and she hides, and he eventually sees her, gets upset that she's wearing the cloak, and she quickly makes up an excuse and says that she found out that Vitu-Ghazi, the city tree where the Selesnyan Conclave is located, has a weakness in it, and she is going to go find out what it is so that they can exploit it so they can make tons of money. Which is a lie. I mean, she knows that she heard something from the Dimir spy, the Selesnyan Dimir spy, saying something, but she never planned, that wasn't why she was wearing the cloak, but she lies and says that that's why she's wearing, because she's going to go infiltrate. Her father's very proud, and she goes. And so we hear a little bit about the Selesnyan Conclave, because she's there with her pod of people. They are learning things like growth spells and things like that. She is learning that the Selesnyans do not shower, or at least they don't properly bathe. They bathe in like warm berries and oil.
Which is gross.
Oh my god, so disgusting.
Ugh.
My pores are clogged thinking about bathing in just oil. That is just the worst idea ever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and add berries in there, warm berries. Yeah. Like, that's just a recipe for, like, bacteria growth.
Yeah. She said that it smelled nice at first because berries and oil.
Yeah, but that's going to go bad very quickly.
Yep.
And if it's all over your skin, because that's how you bathe.
Yep.
Gnarly.
Yep. And she mentioned she was walking around all day, and so she's like super ripe, because turns out she goes to take out her wallet to pay for more expensive robes for a ceremony that's going to be had, and it turns out they have a bartering system. So for this bartering system, I wrote this down, she wanted the robes. The person that had the robes wanted a kettle for it. But to get the kettle, she had to go to a blacksmith or a person that would make the kettles who wanted socks. And so she went to someone who knitted socks, and they wanted wool from a wolf. So she went to a wolf rider who said that they could have the wool if they walked her wolf, or if she walked their wolf, which she did. So she walked the wolf, got the wool, gave it to the person who made socks, gave her socks, which she gave to the smith who gave her the kettle, and then by the time she brought it back to the person who was going to give her the robes, they had already been given a kettle. And so
the cat came back the very next day.
That's right. Or side quests in video games. Get me this and this and this and this and this, and then you can have this one probably really cool thing, but good God, did it take you way out of your way.
It's not worth all of that other stuff.
So yeah, that was a thing that happened. She didn't get those robes, by the way, but she was able to see the city tree in Vitu-Ghazi, and she finds this magical, Selesnyan artifact, magically appears in her pocket, and she looks through it at the tree and realizes that there was an Izzet mage that had done some damage to the tree, and the tree had been regrown, but only kind of seemingly visually or barely structurally, because she sees that there are imperfections in the tree. There are struts that are barely holding it up, and there's the weakness, is that one well-placed attack on this tree could easily send the whole thing toppling down because of how poorly it was built back up again following, again, this prior attack of some kind. She now knows this information. She goes back home with it quickly to tell her father. Her father makes her bathe first before telling, and calls her mother home from being out with her social circle to hear this information about how their daughter did. And her mother, kind of seeing her separately from her father, says, "Oh, we missed you so much. It's so great to see you. The house wasn't the same without you. Here, I know that you just went there to be a Selesnyan because it's what you've always wanted. So here's a relic or an object for you. Just tell your father that you found this. Lie to him, show him this, and that's what you can do." And so she takes this item, she goes and has dinner with her family, and she was fully planning on telling her father, and then after a speech from her father, which I'd rather talk about towards the end, in the full review, but she gets a speech from her father, a very heartwarming, family-based speech from her father, and she decides, you know what, I'm not going to tell him about the tree, instead just shows him the crown of convergence, which is what her mother had given her, which he said was worth thousands, so the fact that the mom just had that was pretty crazy to begin with, but she shows him that, he's very proud, he's very happy, and the story ends with them being together as a family, but also she gets one over on her father, but in the cutest way possible.
Yeah.
By giving him or saying that she got a money tree, right, or a coin tree, and what that means is that it's just a tree in a pot.
It's not a tree, is it?
She said it was just a sapling, and then it would eventually break its, get too big and spread its roots elsewhere or whatever.
I just thought it was like a little plant.
Right, at that time, yeah. So it started as a little sapling in a little pot, and her father normally wouldn't let it in the house because it's green, but she said once a day there's a coin that you can get out of it, and he finds a gold coin in the soil. And so he cultivates it, he talks to it when he thinks no one's around.
And he's super adorable.
Yes, absolutely adorable. And he takes very good care of it. And then you find out that, which I expected once I read that, but still thought it was very, very adorable, as Amy put it, that every night Miri goes and places a gold coin in the soil for her father to find the next day. And it's a way for her to get a little bit of a win over her father in getting some greenery in the household.
Right.
That, obviously he has come to find that he really enjoys having there. So that's the quick summary. I thought I did a little bit better this week on a quicker summary.
Yes, that was a nice summary.
I'm working on it, I promise.
It was definitely a summary.
Yes.
And it was definitely nice.
Yeah, instead of a full retelling of the story.
Yes.
So if you have not had a chance to read the story, that was the
read it.
Quick and dirty summary, but we really, seriously, we did not do it justice. With the summary, we never will. That's not the point. It's just to give people a reminder or a general idea. So feel free to go check it out. But on to the full review itself. I've been talking a lot. What do you want to focus on with this review?
I don't know. It's tough.
Excuse me.
I liked the story. I liked that I wasn't expecting to... I shouldn't say expecting to like it so much, but I didn't expect the tone of the story to be so upbeat.
That's because it's Orzhov.
Right.
Because I agree with you.
And
I wasn't
there were
expecting
so
that
many
at all.
dark edges.
Yep.
But they were just on the edge.
I wrote here, one of the things that made me laugh hysterically, but at the same time, Amy and I both were like, ugh, was when she's working with the Flesh Mage, she talks about like running over when the Selesnyan is there. She kind of runs over to like listen through the door, and when she runs over, she knocks over a pile of kneecaps.
Yeah,
that's just
so
in the
gross.
It's really gross.
What?
It's really gross, but I loved it so much. But I read it, and both of us were like, "No, ew, no."
Like, why are they just in a pile? No.
It's Thralls, man. That's so gross, and I love it. I loved it so much. It was a great
The flavor
image.
is always great in these stories. Thank you, Nikki Drayton.
Yes. And Nikki was in full force this week in her story when she talked about her love, Miri's love for Selesnya. Her father squashed that dream before it could take root.
Yeah, you love her puns.
I love them. I love them so much, especially when because I'm sure I've missed some.
Oh, I'm sure.
Just because,
even though you're the pun king.
That's what I do. It's my thing. Much to Amy's chagrin, it is what I do. I can't help it. But yeah, so I loved that a lot. There was the callback in this story. I heard people online saying that there was more than one callback, and maybe we missed the other ones, which is fine. I'm more than happy to go back in and find those little Easter eggs.
We'll leave it in the comments.
Yes, definitely. But the one that we did notice was when her father came home. One of the times that he came home and was upset was when he had gone down to talk to somebody at the docks, and he was upset because he said he had almost been crushed by a crate of whiskey. That is brilliant. That is the first story that Nikki Drayton ever wrote under the cover of Fog. I was like, I'm not going to remember the name of the story. There you go. Under the cover of Fog, the
Nice.
Demir-based story from Guilds of Ravnica. And it was the Demir agent who had taken that potion or whatever that made him like super enhanced, like all of his abilities and stuff. And so he went to his job at the docks and was like moving around stuff with a crane and basically dropped a crate of whiskey near his boss, and his boss and the person that he was with had to like jump out of the way. And so turns out that was Miri's father. We come to find out now. Yeah, so cool. Because again, it takes nothing away from the story if you didn't know that.
Right.
Because you'd be like, okay, he was down at the docks and he almost got crushed by a crate of whiskey. Okay, people sell things at the docks or ship things in at the docks. I can picture that. So it takes...
You might be like, that's oddly specific, and then just move on.
Yeah, because it's just a cool bit of flavor. But it's not. It's a callback, it's a reference, it's an Easter egg for people that know the prior stories. And again, because I just said we probably missed things, but we didn't necessarily notice that we missed them, so it's not like we were like, why was this thing in the story? That doesn't make sense. And somebody then says, Joe and Amy, it was a callback to this prior story. Like,
Again, please do that. Leave it in the comments.
Yes, definitely let us know. But regardless, it's such a nice inclusion in the story because it's a nudge and a nod to your loyal readers, to your loyal fans, and to your loyal Vorthos, right?
Yeah.
That follow these stories and love them. And it doesn't mean that I went back and read Under the Cover of Fog after seeing that callback, but I remembered it enough, right? And again, even if I didn't, people talking about it online and saying, hey, and again, I didn't fully read those because I didn't want to spoil myself. I can now go and read those things now that I've read the story, but people talking about it online and saying like, hey, did you notice there was this callback and this callback? You can go, oh man, I don't really remember that. And then you go back to the story and read up on it and you remember. So it's a nice way to jog your memory of those stories and a nice throw in for Nikki, and you can tell that it means that she cares, right? I'm sure that Wizards wasn't like, throw in those little nods here and there. Like, that was just her calling back to her hard work that she did previously in the other stories. And, you know, for what it's worth from me, Nikki, props on that. Because that's really cool.
Yes.
And the last, I mean, the main thing that I wanted to talk about, besides, like, sorry, there are two things. One of my favorite stories of all time, to date, is Games by Alison Luers, talking about, no, why am I not going to remember their names? The brother and sister, you can tell me in the comments, but I'm going to remember it, like, as soon as this video is done, like, as soon as I turn that camera off.
JaAR.
Thank you, Gisa and JaAR. Thank you.
Yeah.
Gisa and JaAR, the siblings from Innistrad, who were
I didn't even know what you were referencing, but you said the siblings.
Well, I said Games. Oh. I said Games.
Yes, but I had no idea what that meant.
Well, there you go. There you go. So, Games... Games was a story from Shadows over Innistrad, I believe, way back when. You can go watch our JaAR of that from way back when.
Yes,
we'll talk about that more later.
We did that JaAR with a bunch of our friends.
Correct. That was absolutely correct. We filmed that in Maryland. But yeah, so...
very far from where we live.
Yes. But that was one of my favorites because it was very unique in the way that story was told, because it was purely told in the form of letters.
Yes.
Back and forth between the two siblings. And you found out all this new information solely through the letters. Yeah. And saying, like, the last time I wrote to you, or since the last time I wrote to you, this has happened. Well, now you have that information, and you don't have to have read it in a story, although you can imagine how that would have been done simply in story form as well. And I loved that it was done in letter form.
I mean, I think the best thing about the fact that was done in letter form was those letters were written by twins.
Correct.
And those twins were at odds with each other.
Yes.
And it was on a plane where, you know, things were very...
tumultuous, if you will.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just messed up.
That's fair. For Shadows and Eldritch Moon, yeah.
Yeah. So it was a very dark plane, and sort of a dark sibling rivalry, but it had the cutesy lightness of being written in the format of being letters from one sibling to the other.
Yeah.
So it kept you in this space that was, I guess, what it would actually be if it was siblings. Mm-hmm. Because I think the two of them were just, like, basically just had a sibling rivalry.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't actually hate each other. And I think if it wasn't written in that way, it would have had a different feel. It would have felt like they did, maybe. Yeah, well, because in this case, they were very far away from one another, but were still talking to one another in that way. So they were still being snarky here and snarky there, and kind of low blows and jabs at one another and things like that. And we talk about that in our review. Seriously, I recommend, first of all, you go read the story, but second of all, that you watch our review, because we did have a large number of perspectives, and I will say, in the room of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us total, I was the only one that didn't have siblings. So we got to have that discussion in the room of, like, you know, what is this like? What did this remind you of interacting with your own siblings and things like that? And so we got to hear people's perspectives, because if it was just Amy and I, you'd hear from the person who has siblings and the person who doesn't. This time we got the opportunity to talk to everybody. But the reason I will say, though, if you're going to go check out that video, that was back before we kept the link in the description for the story. Oh, yeah. So you would have to go onto the website and find the story.
Which you should be able to just search Shadows over Innistrad Games, and hopefully it will come up for you, like on Google or something. But the reason I bring it up, because otherwise that was a hell of a tangent. The reason that I bring it up is because this story, as I said, was told in ledger form. And with her notes, you might not think that was the case, because it was with her notes about things, it was just like any other story told from a first-person perspective, which is how Nikki's been telling her stories. But this was, it started off with like bullet points of like, you know, this is what I got and this is how much money and where and etc.
This is all the money I'm taking from people, you know.
Exactly. And so we got to see that in ledger form. And then instead of like the typical, like a line on the page showing just a passage of time and you don't know how long that period of time was, if it was just later in the day, and because we're going to travel now, passage of time. When we get to where we were going, you know, that kind of thing. This one, it was a line delineating passage of time, and then the next thing you know, it's the next date, right? And that could be the next day, it could be 2 days later, 3 days later, what have you.
Whatever date they show us from the ledger.
Right, and they show that date, such and such of Prav or whatever. And so that information is out there, and I will give a shout out, or at least commend, there are Vorthos out there who, because dates were given, they now can put together the puzzle of when things have occurred versus when they haven't. We have the names of the different months on Ravnica. We are not those type of Vorthos.
No.
We are just here to review the stories. But that's to take nothing away from those people who pour into that and go that far in depth. Because that's not what we do, but that does not mean that that is a bad thing. I commend them, and I enjoy reading about their findings and looking at the hard work that they've put in. So I want to acknowledge that. Any and all, because there are some who I could name, but there are many in general who do that. So thank you to all of them for doing that, because I sure as hell wouldn't want to. But being able to look up that kind of thing is really cool. And, you know, for Nikki and Wizards to give us those dates for people to be able to piece together some kind of a timeline.
So the thing that kind of parallels that other story that we mentioned is the fact that it's got that contrast.
Yes.
Again, where you've got the starkness of the ledger and the violence associated with that profession.
Yes,
I guess
the bill collector or whatever,
and also
tax collector.
and there's also a darkness and almost a violence to the narrator's other profession as well.
Yes, thrall making.
And then it's sort of contrasted so starkly with the just plain adorableness of her and her family.
Yes.
And how they interact and how much they care about each other. It's very, it's interesting, dynamic. It mirrors real life. Yes,
and it's so interesting because I try to call out my own hypocrisy whenever I notice it, if that is in fact what it is. But I remember the last story, the Simic story that we talked about, when I mentioned that I didn't quite enjoy the heavy-handedness of the message at the end of the story, where it was like, oh, well, now we've realized that we work better as a team because I understood this thing that you didn't like and you understood this thing that I didn't like, so let's team up from now on and just do the best that we can together. And I thought that was a little heavy-handed, and yet I found myself, when reading this story, kind of realizing that I was not as upset by what one could argue was the heavy-handedness of the family matters and family sticks together message of this story. I loved this.
Because it wasn't force-fed to you. It was given to you on a platter of death and vileness.
Right.
And so it balanced.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, again, I didn't think that it was heavy-handed. I didn't. But I wouldn't be surprised if other people did think it was heavy-handed, and like I said, I want to try to call out bias if and when I see it, or hypocrisy on my part, where one week I'm like, oh, that message was so heavy-handed, and then the week after I'm like, I loved it, it was adorable, and it's like, okay, what?
Well, you just need to sort of hone your explanation of that, so that people can understand, you know, when something feels heavy-handed to you and when something feels organic.
Right, and try. That's why I was trying to analyze it, and so thank you for kind of articulating why, because that's a fair point. I'm just curious for everybody else if you felt the same way. Did you agree that the other story was heavy-handed, and did you agree that this story was not? Did you feel completely opposite? Did you feel opposite on one, not the other? Always love to hear those
maybe
points.
Leave something in the comments too if you have insight as to why one or the other.
Right. And some of these family moments were so cool and so cute. The one that stands out to me was, her father's motivation is just get as much money from wherever he possibly can to make himself appear as wealthy as possible.
Right.
Or stay as wealthy as possible, what have you. But one of the examples was going to the horse races. These were the dromad races. And talking about, like, betting all of his money and then being super happy and thanking the spirits when he won, or, more often, cursing the spirits and their picks when he lost. And then she remembers, since she went there with him as a kid, that he always knelt down to her towards the end of the day and always found that one remaining coin stuck behind her ear. That's so cute. Because
so now she's paying him back for that with the tree.
That's right. Exactly.
Full circle.
100%. And it's adorable. And again, there's that moment at the end where, before the tree part, where she doesn't tell her father about the weakness to the city tree, because her father just flat out says, like, you know what, even if you hadn't found anything, like, it's just, the mom was like, this house hasn't been the same without you, we've missed you, it wouldn't matter if you didn't find anything, we're all together as a family, like, that's what mattered to them in that moment, despite the fact that her father's only motivation that we'd seen throughout the entire story was money. Get money and do whatever you can with money.
Racism, basically.
So,
but this story, I feel like, is a good example of how a younger generation can still have love and a level of respect for their parents, even if their parents are not the best people.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they come to find out about their parents, what their parents' weaknesses are.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's racism or get rich quick schemes, or whatever things about your parents are things that other people would necessarily frown upon or think weren't forgivable enough to be their friends, perhaps.
Yeah.
That's something that can be possibly overlooked
Mm-hmm.
by their child, because their child a lot of times just innately loves them.
Yes. So I thought that message was really cool. And so it worked its way in throughout the story, and again was more prevalent towards the end, but it was present earlier on, and so it didn't come out of nowhere and surprise you at the end, which I guess is another reason why I enjoyed it, because it just came to the logical kind of crescendoed conclusion of that message. And so, kind of in honor of that message, I'll get sappy for a moment, if you will, if you'll allow me to, before we close this thing out. All right, Amy's out.
Okay, well, bye.
But I wanted to give a quick, just an apology for the fact that this video came out on a Friday instead of a Thursday. It was a little bit of a scheduling thing. I think we've mentioned this previously, we are planning a wedding, and whoo boy, is that an experience for us. So,
it's very stressful, very time consuming, very tiring.
Yes. So thank you all so much for bearing with us on that.
Yes.
Also, I will say, I'm pretty happy because now, and we'll just say that this is the main reason why we did it this way, but now this video gets to come out, or has come out if you're watching it, has come out on my birthday. And it's a pretty like significant birthday for me. I don't mind telling all of you that I'm turning 30. So that's a thing, the big 3-0. So I'm happy about that, and I also think it's kind of cool because it was not something that I was even aware of, but I looked online. March 8th is apparently our JaAR anniversary, which I was also not aware of. The first episode of JaAR came out on March 8th. We stopped with episode numbers recently because, good God, well, I know
it was getting to be a bit much.
Yeah, well, and we had done JaAR throwbacks, and we had done things like that, here and there.
Which made it difficult to determine what the actual number was.
Right. Which is why we kind of scrapped it at the beginning of this year in 2019, and now we're just doing JaAR, right? It's just It's still JaAR. We just don't have the numbers up. But if you look at the playlist, as long as the playlist is up to date, because every once in a while I have to go in and realize that playlist is not up to date and fix it. But if you look at the playlist, you'll see how many JaARs we've done. But that was the first JaAR was March 8th, 2016. Wow. So we are coming up on our 3-year anniversary of this.
That's nuts.
Yes, it's crazy. And so I want to thank you all, whether you've watched every one, whether this is your first one, whether you've stopped in, whether you've watched for just Ravnica Allegiance, Guilds of Ravnica, whatever amount of JaAR episodes you've watched,
right.
It's a huge thank you. We've said we're not planning on stopping anytime soon. We are going to have a lot of thinking to do when the book comes out, and trying to figure out how we're going to do that. Because I want to read the book for me. If we can figure out a way to do a proper review of it, because I'm sure as hell not doing a summary. Unless we're doing chapter by chapter, and that seems very not fun.
We need time to figure out what we're doing.
Exactly. And so
especially with the wedding coming up, that's
to be fair,
not entirely at the forefront of our minds.
No. And to be fair, that book will come out after the wedding, thankfully.
Yes.
We're not going to give you the exact date yet, but you'll find out when it happens and whatever, what have you. Stay tuned. But my point in mentioning all this is to thank all of you. 3 years of JaAR is a lot. And again, the milestone that we are up to, we're talking about this on the episode that we discuss family a lot, and that's a big deal. So thank you all very much for joining us, for giving us your comments, your feedback, your constructive criticism, your just joining us in all of those things. I was gonna get there, which as we do every week, and we join you in doing so, and you join us in showing off all of our
#Vorthos Pride.
I was gonna get there, I promise. That was Amy's way of going, you're long-winded, just get to it.
No, actually, I felt that earlier, but at that moment it was just, please remember to say this.
By earlier, she means the last 100 plus episodes of JaAR.
No, I meant 5 minutes ago.
Also that.
Yes.
So, yeah, the past 30 years of my life. So, thank you guys very, very much for joining us on this episode, any and all episodes. There are more to come. Next week is the Azorius, the finale of the Ravnica Allegiance stories. So definitely stay tuned for that. Once again, I want to thank you guys so much for watching this episode of JaAR here on Geek for All. Please feel free to show off your #Vorthos Pride in the comments down below to talk about this episode. And yeah, from the Geek for All YouTube channel, once again, I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, guys, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.